All right, welcome back, everybody, to another interview with the Coaches episode. And today we have somebody. He wasn't too prevalent there this last season. He had some stuff going on, but it's one of the dudes that I like a lot out there. And man, I'll never forget the ride in your car around during lunch. Oof. But Morrison Waud, how are we doing, buddy?
Good. How are you?
Hanging in there, man. Just doing the dang thing. Um, how was your holidays? How's
No, it was good. It was good. Yep.
how's business, man? Everything going great?
Yep. We have a print lab, and it gets kind of busy right before the holidays, and then kind of falls off a little bit, just after. So now is our time to kind of, re-gear up for the rest of the year, and figure out what we're gonna do, uh, take inventory, do all that fun stuff.
Oh
So
yeah, good
yeah, just
holiday
kind
then.
of
You said
slow down. Oh yeah. Yep.
fantastic, dude. Well, you've seen a couple of these, so you kind of know what this is about. Where
Hmm.
I'm just kind of asking some questions like most stuff that I ask everybody else, and then here and there might have some specific questions pertaining to you versus some of the other guys, whatever. But always the first one, always is how did you get into riding motorcycles? How did that all begin?
My family didn't have any history of motorcycles growing up, so I wasn't around them. I didn't really know anybody that had them. I knew a few people that had them, or like borrowed their older brother's motorcycle in high school and brought it by, that kind of thing. But I was 26 years old, and I just been thinking about it for like most of the summer, just kind of plotting a little bit. And then I just finally decided one day I woke up and I was like, today's the day. I'm gonna go get a motorcycle. And so like the night before, I'd gone on the website of this like big dealership in Chicago, and I kind of done some research and was like, okay, you should start with the 250. And I was like, yeah, but maybe a little bigger. And so I found a Suzuki GS 500F is what I went to go look at. And I was like, that's a little more upright, a little bit more relaxed. It should be, a bit more power than a 250. It's reasonable. And then I walked in the showroom and I saw a 2006 GSXR 600. And I never saw the 500 again. And so I was, I was looking at that, and it was, the blue and white one, like the standard GSXR livery that everybody had, with the blue wheels and stuff like that. And I was just like, oh man, this is great. And, I had a couple of friends with me, that did not have my health in mind. And I was like, do you think I should do this? And they're like, I don't know anybody that has one of these that doesn't love them. You should absolutely go ahead and do this. So, I didn't have a motorcycle license. I didn't have any of that, which is not great planning. And so, I talked to the sales guy. I'm like, hey, if I like pay for this outright, can I like figure it out in your parking lot? And he's like, yeah, that's fine. He also didn't have my best interest in mind. He sold me the bike. And then I didn't even know the basics of it. I knew you should have a helmet, so that was obvious. But I went there wearing like khaki cargo shorts, right? And I'm like, this will be fine. And they're like, yeah, maybe not shorts. So got myself some jeans there, switched into jeans. And then, I'm like, all right, got the bike. They prepped it for me. And I'm like, all right, so I can kind of like tool around in your parking lot for a few minutes before I head home. And they're like, yeah, no problem. And then I noticed that like most of the employees came out to have a smoke break. And,
Oh
you know,
shit.
and kind of watch me kind of like, very, wiggly, kind of go around the parking lot and stuff like that. And, I did like maybe 2 laps, and I was like, I don't want to be a show here anymore. I'm like, all right, that's it. And I lived downtown in Chicago at the time. And I drove it like right downtown. Nothing, didn't, that was it. That was like my formal training,
Oh
was,
Jesus.
just learning there in the parking lot, and so I remember that night I went somewhere, with the bike, of course, because I was taking it everywhere after that. And, I had my brand new jacket and, all this new, like fresh gear. And, I'm with a group of people, and this one guy's like, oh man, how long have you been riding? And I'm like, including the ride here? He's like, yeah. I'm like, about 45 minutes. Uh, and, it's one of these things where it's like, uh, I didn't really try to learn anything about motorcycles until like the day after I had it, right?
Yeah.
So the first night I'm on this thing, and I'm like, I just know what I've seen, right? And I've
Yeah.
seen people hanging off these things, and so I'm like, that must be how you turn. And so like, I'm on the highway doing just regular highway speeds, like 60, 65, and there's these big sweeping turns going into the city. And I'm barely making these turns. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And like, I got there okay. Lower speeds is a different story, so I'm looking it up, and I read about counter steering, and I was like, oh, someone's trying to get me killed. And so I go out and I I found like open road and a couple lanes on either side, and I tried it, and I push on the handlebar, and sure enough, the bike goes that way. I was like, no shit, that's crazy. And so like I wouldn't recommend it for anybody to just kind of go out and figure it out. But man, it was a blast. And then I eventually did take like a motorcycle safety course and got my M endorsement that way and stuff. And I eventually did get all the right stuff. Um, but yeah, it was an interesting time.
That's fantastic.
Yep.
So who did you ride with, or like how long did you ride street?
Yeah, so I got the bike at the end of August in 2008, and I just rode on the street for the rest of the summer. And actually, the first year I had the bike, I was just doing lots of dumb stuff. I made it a point to ride like once every month just to say I did it. So I found like a day in January, a day in February, did that, and I was on the bike at least once every month, quite a bit when it was warm, but when it was cold, at least once here and there. But I knew right away that like this was not really made for the street. I wasn't, I didn't get it to be on the street. I got it to do track days and stuff. So in May of 2009, I did my first track day. Um, and after that, I still rode on the street. I rode with some of my friends. I had a few friends that had bikes. Um,
How did
and
you?
I would find people here and
What did you
there.
say about how did you get to or who introduced you to like to want to get on the track?
I'd already done car track days, and so I just
Okay.
had known from seeing stuff that like really you can drive these on the street, but they like you're never going to be able to really use them on the street, and certainly not terribly safely. So I rode around quite a bit just because I loved it, but I always knew that the track was the place that these were really made for.
Now, were you still in Chicago the time
Yep.
you did your first track day?
Yeah, yeah. I was in Chicago till 2017 is when I moved
What
to
what was
Cleveland.
that first track that you did?
Blackhawk Farms was my home track for a long time. Yep.
So your first track day. I mean, obviously with cars it's one thing. With bikes it's
Yeah.
different, right? I mean,
Yep.
it's
Yep.
probably you still get a little bit of like I don't know, a little anxious or whatever it is. But like, what did you think going into it? Especially already knowing cars and doing car track days, but was your perception going into it different
Mhm.
from reality?
I for sure thought I was going to die. I thought there was a very good chance that I was going to die. And as a matter of fact, I went with one of my friends. We didn't have a trailer, nothing. He drove a car. I rode the bike, and he had to work. He worked at a restaurant, and so he got off at like midnight. And so we get to the hotel at like 2 in the morning for the track day that starts going to be at like 6 o'clock. And so we get there super late. We check into this like crappy hotel, and we sit down. And we just like turn on the TV for a second. And it's this like hotel in Rockford, Illinois, and like the TV station had this little clip it would play at the end of the day before the TV station actually turned off. And it was like F-16s flying and Mount Rushmore in the background and the faded like American flag waving as the airplanes flew by and like this patriotic song. And then it just like cut out and went to the TV test screen. And my friend knew I was freaked out, and he looks over at me. He's like, I think that's what death is like. And I was just like, great. And then we went to bed. And so the first track day, I was freaked out. Yeah, and it was fine, of course. I took it easy. I certainly wasn't setting any lap records, not by a long shot, but everything was fine. The worst part was my poor planning. I then had to ride that bike after my first track day, after not sleeping very much the night before, like an hour and a half home after I was already spent. So a lot of Advil that day,
Oh yeah.
but yeah.
And so you were there until 2017, you said, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then was Blackhawk Farms the only track that you had ridden at the while you were there, or did you go
Oh
do some
no,
other
no,
ones?
no,
Or
no. I went all over, So I got involved with the shop. And I worked for the shop for a while. So we would sell tires at CCS race events. We would also do like trackside support during track days, which is how I got involved with the track day organization and started coaching. But we went all over, and so Blackhawk Farms is where it started. But through with different organizations and the shop, we went to Road America, Blackhawk Farms, Autobahn. The different configurations, north, south, and combined. Putnam Park, Groton. We went down to Barber. We went to Jennings. We went all over.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So you said
Yep.
that you started coaching with CCS,
No, I started coaching with an organization called Motovid.
Motovid.
Motovid, yep,
Okay.
Motovid, yep, yeah, and they're great. And they do stuff at Blackhawk Farms and Road America, and it's really a great organization. Yep.
Okay. So how did you get into what led you into coaching, and like what was that whole thing like? Did someone just grab you up and be like, "Hey, you've been here a lot, whatever," or like how did that
Yeah.
process go for you?
Yeah, pretty much. I had moved up through the different, novice to, they have two intermediate groups in that. So like a lower intermediate and upper intermediate and then advanced. And I'd moved up and I'd been advanced. I was running events with them in sport bike track time and stuff. And so, it was, and I had done it long enough without causing a problem that they knew that, I was,
Yeah.
at least decent at what I was doing. I was never the fastest guy at the track, but my goal was always just to be like competent.
Hmm.
And so, they saw that and they were looking for some help. I kind of lightly been involved with some of the operations just because of my position with the shop. And so, like during the riders meeting, they would invite vendors up there to like kind of give their spiel, and I normally drew the short straw, and it was me that had to go up there and talk about what we were doing there and this and that. And so, I was hardly staff at that point, but I was doing some staff things,
Yeah.
and helping out here and there when I could. And so they just, I think that I had a friend that was coaching. He just said, "Hey, you want to give this a try?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So I started doing that, and then I don't think I was a customer again. I was always coaching if I was there.
Nice.
And
Nice.
and so that was, I think, 2016 is when that was, and I coached with them until 2018, 2019. I'd go back here and there a little bit and help out.
So how did you were coaching with Lean or no?
Nope.
Nope, just
Nope.
with fast tracks.
Yep. Yep.
So how did you get introduced to coaching at fast tracks?
So that's kind of an interesting story. So I moved to Ohio, and I still was doing the bike stuff in Illinois, and I decided I wanted to do some stuff around here. Nelson Ledges is not too far from my house, like 20, 25 minutes. And so I got a car, started doing car track days, and started getting friendly with the staff there. And I was talking to Fred, who runs the track, and we were just talking about our different interests and stuff. And he found out that I also did bike stuff and had coached doing bike stuff. And so he called me in the winter, maybe it was 2021, something like that, and just asked if I'd be interested in coaching for fast tracks. And I was like, yeah, I'll be happy to come out and give it a shot. Which is funny because my first time coaching fast tracks was the first time I'd ever been on the track at Nelson Ledges on a bike.
Really?
So yeah, I just it just kind of went out there. I was like, oh, here we go.
But you have
So like,
tons of laps in the car though,
yep, yeah.
which we'll
Yeah,
touch
I
on
already
that
had,
here in a little bit because
yep.
I just think it's super interesting because we kind of chatted when you took me for a ride and just some of the things you were telling
Mhm.
me. And we've had other conversations, whatever, and it's a lot of that stuff's really cool as well. But yeah, so like the first year with Fast Tracks is when
Mhm.
that was your first year coaching with in
Yep.
Ohio, right?
Yep, that's correct. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. So what do you like about coaching? Like what is it about coaching that keeps you doing it? I ask sometimes about like, why did you get into coaching?
Hmm.
Sometimes it's kind of, which you can answer that. I know sometimes it's kind of like it just kind of happens, and some people
Yeah.
are, going after it or whatever. But you know, why did you want to get into coaching? And from all the years that you've been coaching,
Hmm.
what do you enjoy about it?
Sure. So, why I got into coaching was definitely, the people. All the coaches that I worked with, as there were very few coaches that I didn't like. I can't even think of one off the top of my head. And all the coaches that I worked with closely, to get bumped up from novice to intermediate, intermediate to upper intermediate, intermediate to advanced, and all the, I took a few schools and stuff like that. Everybody that I was involved with those things were great, and I really looked up to them. There was one person in particular who's unfortunately since passed away, but his name was Harry Worth. And Harry, he had a large role in Motovid, and he was just one of the nicest, most knowledgeable guys. Very approachable. He wanted the best for everybody, and he was super cool. And everybody liked Harry. And even the fast guys would ask him for advice, this and that. He was a real nice guy, and I wanted to be like that. I really liked what he was doing. I knew I was never going to be the guy with the track record that people were talking about. Getting those the last second or two off their time. But what I personally wanted when I got into this was to do it as safely and as competently as possible. And I think I do a fairly good job of that. And that's what I think I can really pass on to people. When people, kind of outgrow what I can offer, I can definitely be like, and now you want to talk to him. This is, there's certainly other people for that. But, definitely, moving up from novice, up to, intermediate and out of intermediate and stuff, especially, I think I can help build good habits and things like that. So that was, that's why I got into coaching. And that's, I think, the same thing about what I like about it is just, being able to see people grow and to kind of offer them a perspective that, at times might be a safety issue. I can't tell you how many times I've been behind somebody and you see their toe dipping below that peg, and they're leaning over and you're like, oh God, that was so close. And
Yeah.
there's just a couple times where and they have no idea. They have no idea. They're paying attention to something else. They have no idea that something bad almost happened, or there's any number of things that could happen. They get real close to the edge. They're just not paying attention, and you can go in there and offer that advice and be like, hey, you gotta try this out. There's been very few people where I've had to tell them, you gotta chill. You're gonna have a real bad time here if you keep doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's you're right. I mean, there's more than one case, just little things, but that could cause a major issue that we tend to correct. And so out of all the times you've been coaching, I mean, it could be with fast tracks or it could be before when you were in Chicago and stuff. Is there a particular instance of coaching, be a particular person or group or something that always just really stuck out in your head? It was just like one of those like special times you'll never just just never forget, something that really just rings with you.
I've made some really good friends coaching. So it's happened several times that I've had like students or customers that have ended up being friends, and I think that's really cool. It's one of the best things about the track is the people. Actually, the best thing about the track is the people. Certainly, it's fun to go around the track and do all that. But it's just the people that you meet there, and it's really interesting because it's one of the very few places where you get like this kind of a mix of people of all different ideas and backgrounds, and and typically everybody gets along really well. I'd say almost all the time, and I think that's really cool. It's like a big melting pot.
Yeah,
So,
that's like, I mean, I've been around car stuff. I like that's why I kind of grew up with like getting into car stuff. And
mhm,
like I've always noticed, or I mean, I think I've mentioned this more than once on these videos, but like there's has something to do with motorcycle track days that's different, like, or motorcycle
mhm,
racing, like even like dirt bike stuff. People are kind of like very, they don't want to exchange help as far as like if you're, even your competitor and stuff, like in with road racing, people just like help each other. Even though that's your
mhm,
competitor, you're still helping. But like dirt bike racing or drag racing or all this different stuff, I don't know how the car road racing stuff is, but there
mhm.
seems to be, like this, while keeping secrets themselves and keeping these certain things themselves, and like you kind of fend for yourself, where like on the motorcycle road racing side, it seems like everybody's just willing to share everything. They just want
Mhm.
everybody else to get better. It's just
Yep.
it's a very great atmosphere. I've never experienced anything quite like it, in other genres of motorsports or anything like that.
Yep. And everywhere I go, it's the same. It doesn't matter if I'm down, in Jennings in Florida, up here in Wisconsin, whatever. It's, everywhere I've been, it's been like that. And people that travel from different areas, from across the country and stuff, and come to different track days, their attitude is typically the same as well.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
Um, so, you've been with Fast Tracks for a lot since it started up again, because I mean, it's like the second iteration of Fast Tracks,
Hmm.
really. But and you've ridden with other organizations and you've coached for other organization stuff, and we're not going to mention anything by name because it's whatever, not putting anybody down or putting anybody up, but like just in difference. Now being in within Fast Track's organization, being there and helping out, working. What do you think about Fast Tracks as an organization that our organization has? That's I don't want to put it as like better. I mean, I say better or whatever, but like something that kind of sticks out that's at I don't know. It's like a key component of something that just raises the bar for us, or just sets us apart from other organizations.
Sure, and I won't name names either, but Fast Tracks really will go out of our way to make sure that people that show up have a good time and are included and are able to ride if at all possible. So, as long as it's not an extreme safety issue, if there's something on the bike that doesn't quite meet the requirements for that day, we'll try to figure it out. We'll try to safety wire something on the spot. We'll try to, find the gear that you're missing. We'll make it work for the day at least, so that people's time isn't wasted as long as it's safe. You know, so that's I've seen places where people show up with like a two-piece suit, even with a zipper, and they're like, "You're not riding today." And it's like that person may have traveled several hours. This might be the only time they're going to get to do it this year. They've come all this way, and now they're just like that. I think that there's some amount of variability that you can have, and just be a human about it, within reason.
Yeah.
You can't have somebody showing up with an unsafe bike looking to run advanced, and have everybody be okay with it, oiling the track and stuff. Of course, that's not okay.
Right.
But I think one of the best things that Fast Tracks does is just really goes above and beyond to make sure that people get to go out and do what they came to do, provided it can be done safely that day.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%, man.
A lot of places you go through tech, and there's no fixing stuff in tech, or there's no solutions.
Right,
It's just
right.
a pass fail, and then if it's a fail, it's a fail, and then get out of here.
Yeah.
Yep.
I got some other more track organization type questions, but I do want to kind of touch on your background with road racing cars, because it's obviously I would assume, I mean, not everything translate, but it does. Learning, and the lines aren't all the same, but they're similar and kind of figuring out the little idiosyncrasies of the track. Racecraft, all these different things, that kind of, I mean, you could expand on this more, but I'm trying to put it some kind of context of like that kind of helped with your track riding with the bike. And can you give us a little bit of background or on your experience with road racing cars, or doing track days with cars, and how some of that has translated over to doing your track days on bikes, things that kind of helped you out, and just different things like that. Can you kind of set some of that stuff up for us?
Yeah, sure. And it's my first track day ever in life was in a car. And then the next few were in a car, and then I switched over to bikes like exclusively for a long time. Didn't go back to cars until 2021, I think.
What was the reason for that?
I just love the bike. The bike is just you tell me where you can get that kind of performance of like a liter bike in a car. It just
Right.
typically doesn't happen. And so it was just that was just all I wanted to do for a while. And then, I wanted something a little bit different. I'm still doing the bikes, but I just wanted to try something different. And so kind of the way that it translates is, there's some stuff that's similar. There's more stuff that's similar than isn't similar, I think. One thing that's easier for me to wrap my mind around in a car than on a bike, although it is largely true on a bike, is there's a lot of stuff that goes on that is essentially none of my business. Going through bumps and stuff like that, even if you get a little bit of head shake on a bike, it's got that steering damper and stuff like that, used to freak me out so bad. And I'd tense up and make it worse. And it was just, I did all the wrong things, right? And really, when I realized that it was essentially none of my business, it got a lot better. The bike is made to sort that out. All these pieces of equipment are made to sort that out. The suspension, the steering damper, all that. In a car, it's easy because you just assume that it's going to sort it out for the most part. The suspension, it's got 4 points of contact.
Yeah.
It's more stable and stuff like that. On the bike, it takes a little more trust, at least for me. to hand it over and let the bike kind of sort it out. And the less I tried to like interfere with what the bike was doing, the better it got. And so that's, one way that it kind of, there is a bit of crossover. There's stuff at Nelson Ledges where, it affects the bike a little bit more. There are, certain turns with little bumps and this and that, and you go through there and, you got to be a little bit more careful on the bike. And the car, you certainly feel it, but it doesn't really care. Where on the bike, it can be a little bit of a pucker moment sometimes, if you hit the wrong spot. Um, but
It's
yeah,
a, it's an
yep,
interesting
go
way to
ahead.
put it, though. It's like, yeah, that's none of my business. I never thought of it like that, but that's, I mean, true. I think about it, but in a different wording than that. But that's a very good
Mhm.
way to put it. It's kind of like I always say, look, being light on the bars, and you go over this stuff, you let the bike do its thing, and you're kind of,
Mhm.
on top of it. You're directing it to, enter a corner. And mitigating the throttle, and then the way the bike exit. But underneath of you, the bike's gonna do its thing. If you tense up, you don't let it do its thing. That's when things go kind of awkward.
Yeah, it's like I tell my kids, it's like you can't ask me for help and then tell me how you want me to help. Like, if you're coming to me at this point, like let's try my way here for a second. And it's just like, if I'm asking the bike to do its thing and then I'm like, no, no, but we got to do it like this, like, what do you think's going to happen?
Right.
So, yeah.
So, what's the fastest you've been around Nelson on in your car? Because I think when we went around there, you were telling me, but I know you've been faster now with your new car, and it blows my
Yep.
mind.
Yeah, in the car I did a 108.4.
It's ridiculous, dude.
So yep, and I think there's definitely still some left on the table. It's a matter of me just going for it.
That's crazy. I like,
Yep.
I'll go back to because I don't know how many. I saw the video. I've showed it to a couple different people because that's like the first. Your 911 Turbo was the first proper Porsche I've ever ridden in, and I've ridden in 1,000 wheel horsepower cars. I've owned 1,000 wheel horsepower car. I've been in
Hmm.
some cool stuff, and that day was the first I've ever been around a road course in a car, and you know how to freaking drive. I remember I always the way I tell the story, it's hilarious. I'll be like, dude, so we're getting this car, and he's like, all right, we'll get and warm the brakes and tires up, and I said, I thought he was fucking joking. Because, like, we're going around warming the tires and brakes up. I'm like, we are freaking flying. Maybe he was just, joking with me. I was like, we do 2 laps, and he pulls in. All right, I think they're warm now. I'm like, okay, that wasn't it? Jesus. And then we go, do a launch and go for a quick lap. And it's like, you were just so calm behind the wheel, having however many 1,000 miles or laps you've had around there or whatever.
Hmm.
And, like, dude, it was just unbelievable. It also put a lot in perspective because, like, on a bike, you don't see the camber.
Hmm.
But when I was sitting passenger in your car, like going into 4, I'm like, holy crap, this is way banked. Like,
Yep.
it was just a different visualization of things, and it gave me a little bit different perspective. But yeah, like,
Hmm.
dude, the brake force of that car, everything, and I mean, that was like you said. I think you were doing like 10s in that.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and like.
Yeah, my best time in that car was a 109.5, 109.6, something like
Yeah,
that.
we were flying and like, just you were like da da da, BSing a little bit, tell me stuff and like, it doesn't like 13, it doesn't like traction control. So as we're braking hard as hell into 13, you're like switching the traction control off, full wheel drift out of it. We get straight, traction control back on, like it was just automatic. And I was like, dude, unbelievable. I was like, that is the coolest thing I've had ever been in with a car. I just tell everybody about it, and it gave me like this insane respect for Porsches. Like I always thought they were cool, but I didn't know
Hmm.
like the real pedigree of it because
Yep.
most of the stuff I've ever been in has been like a Boxster or a Cayman or whatever, and that's not really like the proper Porsche. And
Hmm.
oh man, it's insane, just fantastic. And I'll never forget that. And hopefully one day I'll get to ride in your new car because man, that'll scare the shit out of me too.
It's even more fun. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, he's as far as driving, man. You're freaking good. I mean, of course, I've not ridden with anybody else around a road course. You're the only person, and I don't like to be the guy that's not in control. Like I don't like going on roller
I hear that.
coasters because,
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm not the one doing the stuff, but like. I felt comfortable with you. You just knew what you were doing, and like, man, it's just unbelievable. So yeah, I'd love to do that again. But yeah, so tons of time on the track, just in
Hmm.
general, and that's like we kind of talked about and you talked about already. The give you some. It definitely helps with like the little idiosyncrasies of the track because there's always like little
Hmm.
things. Like for instance, when I go into one, like I don't stay on the inside of that patch. Like even though that's where the apex is, if you want to
Hmm.
cross it, to me it just makes the bike feel weird. So I just go, right across the patch instead of going here and going across it
Hmm.
the other way because you get a little wiggle, whatever. But do you find that road racing you get to with the car, you get to feel more or less with than what the bike feels?
It's hard to tell. I feel like in the car, I have more mental currency to spend on paying attention to different things. I'm certainly better at driving the car around the track. I'm okay on the bike, but I'm certainly better with the car, and I have a lot more time, especially at Nelson Ledges, with the car than the bike at this point. So it's easier for me to slow down and kind of see different things, try different things, pay attention to what's going on. The groundhog that's been watching us for 3 laps over here, that kind of thing. Um, so yeah, with the car, it's a bit easier.
So, do you at this? We'll say at this current point, do you enjoy
Mhm.
the car more or the bike?
They're different. I like I said, I'm certainly better at the car, but there's no substitute for the bike. Because the car, it's great, and you can pull back the electronics to a great degree and stuff. And the bikes now, a lot of them have electronics and stuff. But even with all the electronics, you're still a mandatory part of that bike. It's not going to save you. Just the way you can move around it, leaning off of it and stuff. Just the enormous difference it makes in how the bike handles, depending on what you are doing with your body. And even just not necessarily your position, just how you're on it. If you're loose on the bars, or if you're tight on the bars, that kind of thing. Just all of this makes a big difference in how that bike will work for you.
So, do you
And
think
there's
it's
something good about that.
do you think it's more difficult to go faster on a bike around the track, or I I'm trying to put this. It takes more skill to
Mhm.
to go fast around the track on a bike versus the car, just because of those things.
Yeah, I'd say so. And I'd say, on the bike, you have to, either trust it or not pay attention to what's going on more, so you can go one of two ways with it. You can either like really, really know what's going on and have a lot of experience, like the physics of what's going on, how much grip you have, how much grip you have left, all this, or you can just not care, and hope that it's going to be okay. And both of them are going to work to a certain point. I'm certainly not advocating the second thing, but
Yeah,
it is definitely one way to go around the track. And I know people that are very fast that have gone around the track like that, and just like eventually, they stuff it. But until then, they're flying,
you're right,
you
right.
know. And then there's people that know a little bit more, a little more cautious, still fast, but the guy that just goes out there and sends it gets there a little bit quicker, than
Yeah, that's
than
what
the other
Jack Miller
person.
said. Taking your brain out.
Yep, yep,
Yeah.
yep. Yeah, so the bike, definitely the bike is way more physical. It takes a lot more skill, I think, to pilot the bike around the track fast.
Not
Yep.
that there's no skill in driving a car around track, because that I
Mhm.
mean there's different feelings and skill sets for it. Obviously, it's just yeah, I would say like physically demanding, probably more on the bike side.
Mhm.
I agree with
Yep.
that. All right, so we'll come back to more motorcycle oriented bike track questions, coach
Mhm.
stuff. Um, One of the things I always ask, and I love to hear everybody's perspective, as you can pull from being a rider, but also as being a coach on this is like, what do
Mhm.
you think is the on average is the biggest hurdle for people, going from novice to intermediate, or intermediate to advanced? I mean, sometimes
Yep.
it could be the same. Some people say, it's the same hurdle both ways. Other people have, well, from, in novice intermediates, this type of situation, in an intermediate to
Mhm.
advanced another. But, what's your perspective on that? What do you think on average?
And I've had this conversation with a lot of people, especially going from novice to intermediate and stuff. I've done a lot of evaluations and things like that. And one of the things that I'll tell people and I'll stress is, look, being quick around the track is certainly one component of it, and you need to have a certain minimum lap time to be able to bump up to the intermediate class. But 90% of what I'm looking for is good decision making. Are you going to make the smart move during a track day when you're coming up on a group of much slower people? Are you going to go flying around them at the last second, or like cut one of them off, or put yourself in a situation where something unsafe could happen for nothing? There's no reason to do that. Or are you going to hang back, wait two more turns, and then go by them somewhere where it's safe? And when are they going to see that situation evolving, and how are they going to set up for it? Are they going to be almost in the middle of it by the time they're like, oh crap, and get on the brakes and almost cause a situation themselves going bowling for the bikes in front of them? Or will they see that? And so decision making is um, you know I don't see too many people going out there and doing really stupid stuff, especially after you kind of point that out, that really we're not looking for them to set a fast lap time. We're
Yeah,
looking to see how kind of
consistency and
consistently see and just safely they can do
yep.
this. Show me a lap, good lap at 70-80%, because that's what you'll be able to go out and do over and over and over. And that's really what we need to see. And so getting past that, realizing that you don't have to be super duper fast to move up. We want to just see that they're not making abrupt movements, that they're not getting too close to other people, that they're not missing other important stuff because they're too focused on getting that bump.
And what do you think about the intermediate to advance?
That's I think that there it's more varied, and then some people just really want that A sticker, that they just want that, that bump. They want to be in that group, and it's, doing it for the right reasons. Because their buddy got bumped, two track days ago. They want to be in the group with their friend, that kind of thing. And so, that's I think that's more with the intermediate to advanced. A lot of times, I've seen more people get held back in novice and not get bumped up to intermediate than I have seen get held back in intermediate and not bumped up to advanced. Generally speaking, by the time you're at the fast end of intermediate, it's pretty obvious, and it's pretty obvious to us as coaches, whether we've seen you do some smart things or some stupid things out there moving through traffic, because at that point you're moving through traffic.
Yep.
And so it's how nice are you to the person that just bumped up out of novice, and what kind of situations are you getting into? So again, a lot of it comes back to safety. um
Yep.
so yeah,
That makes a
that's
lot of sense.
yep.
What do you think as far as Nelson Ledges? What do you think on average is the most difficult part of the track to master? I've had several
uh,
answers, and it's generally one of three corners, but ends up usually getting down to two parts on average that most of the coaches have talked about. But yeah, I'm curious to see, especially with your car experience, because
yep.
just knowing the track is knowing the track. But what do you think in general? For motorcycle riders, is the most difficult part of the track to master, or get, not so much master, but at least get competent at. Like, which one's the most difficult to get, or I guess in theory, like, what's the last one they get competent at, or what one's the one
Yep.
everybody struggles with? You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Yeah. And I think it also, breaks down by group again, so for novice riders, a lot of what I see, and I have to keep coming back and telling people over and over again, use the whole track. You don't necessarily need to get to the edge of the track, but they're using, a third of the track, and they're not really, and it's you're not really going to get fast if you're, cutting the corners like that, if you're not, using the track. And also a lot of them, turn in too early. That's a very novice thing. Are those kind of things, and they're just so fixated on just not crashing that they're not really paying attention to slowing down, using the whole track, really taking advantage of adding safety, really. And then as people start to get faster, and at least for me, that turn at the end of the back straightaway is the kink, right? That kink with the there's like a little patch,
Yep.
and there's a big difference. Like every 2-3 inches, it's a completely different feel going through there. And I think most of them at most speeds, I'm not the fastest rider, so I haven't gone, flying through there, at like your speeds, but, at most speeds, as long as you don't freak out, most angles are fine. But what it'll do is it'll upset the bike to different levels going through there. And it's, how much mental currency do you want to pay to what's going on going through there? And so I think that's a hard area. Four, that big left hand turn, that's actually like kind of a couple turns, and that's difficult for people in the carousel as well. Sometimes, it can be difficult how far you can kind of drive into the carousel before you really have to start slowing down. If you're going to go a little bit wide at the end of the carousel. And they always say, what's the most important turn on a racetrack is the one before the longest straightaway. So that's the end of the carousel, and if you screw that up, that's a big place, at least where I've made up time, is getting the carousel right. And that those last few, sections up to 12 and 13, if you can hold speed through there, you're doing yourself a big favor.
Yeah.
But you can also lose a lot of time there as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's like, it's not a difficult track as far as learning the layout of the track. It's not a technical track or anything, but it just takes a lot of balls.
It's a very high average speed track.
Yeah.
And that's the part where it's like, there's not a lot of stuff going on necessarily, but man, the consequences for being wrong with a lot of these, turns, everything there, the grass is always wet. It's always just going to be like, being on ice. If you hit that grass, you're never going to have a good time. So, it's the consequences are, high. It's a little unforgiving if you have a problem.
Yep. It's I always say 4. That's always the one that I see. Even the guys from out of town that are like, Moto A guys or really good club racers. 4 is the one that just because I've had so many laps around the track, I'm very, very comfortable with it that I usually catch or can make a pass or something into that, because there's a couple different lines through that, and it's one of those ones that's like it's hard to trust that. I mean, once you know it, you can get in there, but there is that ledge at the top, and like if you're out there, we'll see you later.
Yep. And the other thing about 4 is, especially on the exit, like you walk the track and you see how banked it actually is, and you're like, geez, and you can really get on it pretty hard there.
Yeah.
Surprisingly hard, car, bike, whatever. Coming out of 4, once those candy stripes start on the left-hand side, for the most part, you can really get on it quite a bit harder than you normally can.
Yeah, you're right. Like I usually,
you also don't want to be wrong. But.
Yeah. I usually clip in the candy stripes and, letting it push out to then hit where that dip off in the grass is. And, yeah, like once I get to the outside there, I mean, I'm rolling on the gas a little bit. But once I get to that spot on the outside, then it's just like full panned. It just there's, like you said, so much grip, so much banking, and you can just hammer out of there. What other one did I have here? I got a couple more.
I will say about turn 4, I got to run the track backwards in my car this year. And
really? How was
that's
that?
one hell of a turn. Well, in reverse, if you think about it, you go into it and it's banked and it flattens out as you exit. So you've got to be pretty careful there coming out of that turn. But that's a trip going in reverse.
Oh, well, how was 13 becoming the first corner?
Great.
Really?
I thought it was great. I loved it. I thought it was great. Yeah. And, so 13, 12 going through there, that there's 13 becomes a big, 180-degree left-hand turn. There's immediate right-hand turn. You're accelerating through that. That's a wonderful section in reverse.
Wow.
The problem is, like, there's not a ton of runoff really going forward, and in reverse, all the runoff areas where you would go off is like a ledge drop.
Yeah.
And so anywhere you go off in reverse, you're gonna have a real bad time.
Yeah. Yeah, because 4 goes from an increasing radius to a decreasing radius, and that would be. Man, that'd mess me up.
And the banking goes the wrong way. I mean, it's still banked the way you want it, but it flattens out as you exit, and so you've got to.
You're right. Yep.
You got to be careful there. And
That's
also, you
interesting.
they come onto the straightaway, and as you exit, what would be turn 1 onto the straightaway, if you have a problem, that bridge is right there. So you're going to smack that bridge if you have a problem. Whereas, when you're running it forwards, you come onto the straightaway. If you hit that bridge, it was totally your fault.
Oh, yeah, gotta be, right?
It's way down the straightaway. There's, that you have a ton of chances to fix whatever problem you're having before the bridge comes up. But going in reverse, if you're going quickly, that bridge is right there. And if you make a mistake, You're
Yeah,
going to see it
that's
up close and personal.
somebody asked about that one time. One of the guys that he's in A, he's been with us since novice. And he's like, yeah, I wonder if we ever
Hmm.
run it backwards. I'm like, I don't. Dude, that would be horrible on a bike. Just thinking
Hmm.
about it, I'm like, that'd be unsafe as all get out, and it'd be super hard to learn that.
Hmm.
Uh, let's see here. Um, oh, I did want to ask you. Did you never have the urge to try to race at all, car or bike?
So yeah, so I thought about it for a little bit. At least with the bike, I'll start with the bike. I thought about it for a little bit when I had first started and was kind of moving up. I had just gotten into advanced, and I actually picked up a Ducati 750 SS. And I was going to do lightweight twin, and I brought it down to Jennings. We got it all, and it was like I was like the 10th owner of this thing. It was
Yeah.
not a nice bike, and I did like 1.5 sessions, and the bike, the red line started like getting lower and lower. I'm like, that's weird. And there was obviously a problem. They took the motor apart later on, and one of the pistons just was like cracked, had a huge hole in it. It was
Oof.
like the motor was wrecked. And so that was kind of the end of that for me. And I considered racing. I just in general, I've never been great at passing people real aggressively. On the brakes is not my strongest skill. And so I thought about racing, but no, I don't think racing was ever going to be for me. I'm not really aggressive enough for the racing. I just kind of wanted the skill and to be decent at doing this. Um,
Yeah,
so
that's probably the biggest thing that I struggled with when I started racing was like, especially you do a lot of track days. You've been doing track days forever, and then
mhm,
if you've never competitively raced in motorsports, like the passing aspects, just it's huge, man. Like, you know, if you can't be aggressive passing, or I wouldn't even say be aggressive, but like the confidence, because I mean, I
mhm,
see with a decent handful of people that's one of the things they struggle with at first is like they want to make that pass, they go in to make the pass. It was probably good, but you could have stuck the
mhm,
pass, and then they go,
mhm,
and there's different reasons why. One is like, well, did I give that guy enough room? Is there a
mhm,
chance that he doesn't know I'm there? And then also the thing of like some of that track day mentality like gets into your head again of like, no, I
mhm,
can't. Like, you have to be civil. And well,
mhm,
in racing, you're not. You don't have to be as civil. You could stuff somebody as long as it's not going to injure them. But
mhm,
yeah, I mean, it took me forever to get like last year. This past year was the most aggressive I've been, and like the year before, I got a little bit more aggressive, but I still wasn't quite there. And this past year, I go, you know what? I just got to go out and just say, I get like from practice, I have to be in my head, 100% committed to it, and then that will set the tone for the day. And I did, and it made a gigantic difference. It's just hard for me to
mhm.
get in that headspace because I'm an older dude. I'm not going anywhere with this. It's just fun, right? So it's really
Right,
hard
right.
to get into a really super competitive mode when it's just
Mhm,
a fun thing. You spend all this money and you have an expensive bike and you come away if you win with like this piece of aluminum plaque that's about $1. But
yep.
it's fun, and it shows you some things and puts things in perspective that you didn't really think of before. Like, I mean, you
Mhm,
usually run your fastest laps doing that, and there's just shows you what really is left in the bike or your
mhm,
your skill set when you're not thinking as much. So it's
mhm,
very interesting.
mhm. Everybody I know that's raced has come back to track days way the hell faster.
Yeah,
I haven't seen a single one of them that went racing and came back and were like, yeah, it got worse. You know,
I still can't do a race lap in a track day though. You know what I mean? I can't
yeah.
put the same time down. It never happens. I've tried to like put my brain in that mode to go out and do one just to see like,
Hmm.
if I can, and it's just not. It's just there's whatever it is, it's just completely different where your mind has that risk factor is just bored in there more. So you're
Hmm.
just more aware of it and you think you're on the limit when you're not. But when you race, you don't
Hmm.
even think about the limit. You know what I mean? It's just
Yep.
like you just go. Which I always find this very interesting, and I'm curious to see your thoughts on it. But like for me, like once you get out of the basics of the fundamentals of riding, and there's
Hmm.
there's different levels of the fundamentals of riding, but once you get your basics down of like, you know, at first it's just like the line, using the track, like you said,
Hmm.
etc. Then there's, body position, these different things, how to brake or whatever. But, you know, mentally is what always, like, that's the biggest factor of holding people back.
Hmm.
What do you think on that? And what have you done? Like, I'm sure you've probably came across those like type of mental blocks or plateaus that
Hmm.
are, it's a mental thing. What have you done? Or haven't you done or whatever have you got like to move past those mental blocks? What are some of the things that you've tried to incorporate or use, or maybe somebody else showed you that
Hmm.
helps you surpass those like mental blocks?
Sure. Something would be like following somebody that you know has a comparable bike, and ideally a higher skill level. But if I can see that my equipment is at least the same as theirs, if not better, and they're doing it, I can do it. And of course there's some of that that's on the rider, of course,
100%. Yeah.
but just being shown that it can be done, and then you go chase them, that's a big help. Another thing is, just like we tell people, it's like look farther ahead, look ahead, look where you want to go. It's trying to kind of like move where you're thinking into the future a bit more. And if I'm less back on the bike with me and more, a half a second in front of myself where I want to be, I'm more likely to make the moves to get me there quickly than if I'm trying to like be back on the bike, micromanaging every little thing I'm doing, if that makes sense. I'm certainly still aware of what I'm doing. I'm just not, trying to pay as close of attention to essentially what's already like eh, a certain distance in front of the bike is the past. It hasn't happened yet, but you're also not doing anything to change it.
Yeah.
And so if you're paying attention to that, you're watching a movie.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
nothing you can do about it. And so that kind of, I wouldn't exactly call it tricking myself, but finding ways to kind of alter where my attention is has been huge in order to go faster and to be safer and things like that.
Yeah, so like if a student asks you, hey, like let's say they're an intermediate or advanced, doesn't matter,
Hmm.
um, outside of novice, we'll say, um, and they're like, I know I can go faster. I'm seeing everybody go faster than me, but I just can't
Hmm.
get myself to go faster, like into turn one or whatever it is. Like,
Hmm.
you know, is there any tips or tricks or things that you can think of to help manage that and maybe break that barrier? Is there any? I mean, a lot of it is, I always tell
Yeah.
people like, well, I can't twist the throttle for you. You know what I mean? It just kind
Hmm.
of is what it is. But I have a couple things that I've tried. I'm curious if you had any like little things that may have worked or just things
Yeah.
you've said that have.
Yeah, it depends on where you are in the day, and what's going on. So what I found to be very helpful is, if you can manage to do it, doing back-to-back track days, do a Saturday and a Sunday. And if I can go and ride on that Saturday and, not necessarily make mistakes, but figure out the stuff, that's it's a little bit more difficult. A lot of times just having that information in my brain, sleeping on it that night, there's really nothing I'm going to be able to do that day, generally speaking, where I'm going to make big leaps and gains. But if I sleep on it and then come back the next day, I find a lot of times that I'll have a new take on it. I'll have a little bit more muscle memory in those areas, and I can concentrate more on what's going to get me a little bit quicker. So it doesn't work. Obviously, if you can't be at the track 2 days in a row, it's not gonna work. And then there's a point of diminishing returns. We've done Jennings for 3-4 days in a row. By the last day, no no one's going out for every session. It's just it's not necessarily helpful. But yeah, spending some time sleeping on it, doing a track walk. A lot of times I have found at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day is good too. But riding, having these problems, kind of making notes of I want to look at this, I want to look at that, and then going out there and checking it out at the end of the day. You know, Kicking the pavement a little bit to see where there's grip. And those patches. I always just assumed that the patches were like ice. I'm not going to put down ice in in these
Right, right.
patches. The patches are generally just as grippy, if not grippier, sometimes than the the pavement they replaced. So going out there and having that experience after it's been a concern of mine all day has been good, and then I know I can just kind of forget about it. Um,
Do you think? So I'll use like turn one for instance again.
mhm.
If somebody was trying to get, to carry more corner speed through there, you know, would you be more apt to tell them to wait and brake later, or like to try to incrementally, carry more speed through there?
Yeah, I would be inclined to tell them to carry more speed through there. And the way that I would suggest doing it, at least, what I would try to do is maybe not charge down the straightaway as fast, brake as hard, and then go through there. Back it down on the straightaway to 70, 80% so that you're not having to get on the brakes as hard. You don't over brake. And then you can go through there and you can get that mental picture of how the speed that you want to be carrying through there, and then work on the braking and, braking at the last second, flying down the straightaway. You kind of break up the track up into sections that you want to work on and really focus on that section. And I'm not saying throw away the other sections, but you can sacrifice a little something. You don't have to go down the straightaway as fast as you absolutely can, break at the last second every single time. If you're trying to work on a particular corner, trying to work on, turn one, then focus on that and make it a little bit easier on yourself.
Yeah, the reason I
Um,
ask is because like that's kind of the perception that I have, or the way that I kind of tell people is like, if you want to carry more speed, braking later is not to break that barrier isn't going to do it, because your
mhm,
brain goes, I know what speed I'm comfortable going through this corner is, and if you're
mhm,
waiting to brake, or you're waiting farther to brake, making you brake harder, most of the time you tend to over brake
mhm,
because you're going faster, and you actually end up going slower through the corner.
mhm,
The thing that I do, I said to like like a little mental trick, and it's similar kind of what you're saying. I just do it a little bit different way. Is yeah, you can still go hard down the straight, but where you normally brake, instead of saying pushing that braking marker 5 feet, how about
mhm,
brake 5 feet earlier, and then where you would normally let off, you're
mhm,
letting off the brake 5 feet earlier.
mhm,
So the turn
mhm.
isn't as close. You're not going to be braking as hard because you're farther back, and that will actually allow you to carry more speed through. And then you go, oh, okay, well I went quicker through that.
Yep.
Also, if you get your braking done upright, the bike tips in way easier off the brakes. So
Mhm.
like that little mental hack is like what I try to do for people to like, kind of get them a little bit more corner speed. But like anybody that would suggest like, just wait five more feet and brake harder or whatever. It seems like one or two things are gonna happen. Either you're gonna slow down, and you're just
Mhm.
gonna be going slow through the corner, or you panic
Yep.
because you're not used to braking that late, and then we have a big problem.
Yeah,
So
and I'm
yeah,
sure there's people that works for. There's several aliens that we ride with, and
yep.
that may be how they do it.
Yeah, you're right. Aliens. I always, I don't know how you are. Me, I just, my risk tolerance is low as far as because running a job and doing my own business and doing this thing, and I have to make money to provide, to have a home and all these things. There's all these, it's like, okay, well I can't throw risk out the window, and it's
Hmm.
always kind of been like that. I don't want to get hurt either. Nobody wants to get hurt or throw their bike down the road and have to pay money to put it back together. But
Hmm.
the so mine was very incremental, baby steps. Uh, it was always hard, and I think other people have a kind of similar feeling when they see a buddy that can take his brain out and they make these gigantic strides, and you're like, what the heck? But like,
Hmm.
you don't want to do that if that's not if you're not that type of person. You definitely shouldn't do that, because like you can get in a lot of shit, and then
Hmm.
that could just destroy destroy your body, your bike, the enjoyment, whatever.
Hmm.
Like you just do it at your pace, right? I mean, everybody has different paces and styles of how they learn and adapt, and that's just how I was. I was a very incremental learner, and I didn't get to the pace I'm at for until whatever till now. So it's and I've been doing it decent amount of time or whatever, but yeah, it's always like I think I told this story a couple times before. My buddy, I had already done track days, but had a hiatus, and we started doing them again with him, and he just like he was one of those guys. He could take his brain out, and could just go out. And he like it just blew my mind. I'm like, I've done track days before and done this stuff, and how the hell is he faster than me already? Halfway through his first year riding at the track, and I mean, it's crazy to me. But then, that caught up with him. It does with those people. And it could put, I mean, he totaled the entire bike. He went off in the carousel. So just, that's something I would have. I'd rather take the time and learn at my pace than go off at the carousel and destroy my bike and get jacked up, break bones or whatever. But
Yep, for sure.
what type of person are you as far as that learning curve, or how you adapt?
Yeah, I'm also very cautious. I'm not. I've had two very minor low sides. They were no big deal, but I don't think a real bad crash. I don't think I'd do super well. um, I don't think anybody's made for that. But so I've always just been super, super cautious. When I started riding, I used to have a policy that when I think I've got one session left, that I actually don't, and I'd just be done for the day at that point. And I'd encourage other people, that I work with at the track and stuff, to like kind of take that, as a way of doing things as well. Um,
Yeah,
and
if I
that
ever
worked out
have,
well for me.
if I ever have like, if I'm, it doesn't matter. It could be 3 sessions left, and whatever session I'm on, if I make a mistake that I generally wouldn't make, I go, you know what?
Hmm.
There's,
Yep.
I'm tired or mentally drained or whatever it is, and it's not good. If
Yep.
I start making these stupid mistakes that I normally would never make, I know right then and there, just little tiny things, and it's
Yep.
not a mistake that would cause me a crash at that point, but I know that's going to be lead up to it.
100%. Yep. Yeah. And then, my experience, those mistakes never got smaller. They never got better. Yeah. Two decent mistakes, or just like two things that made me go, huh. And that was normally when I would call it. Yep. Yeah.
Let's see here. What else do I got? This is one I've been kind of asking a little bit recently because it started with like this podcast thing. Or okay, not a podcast. I'll take that back because I don't want to call it a podcast. Just interviewing the coaches and stuff with Fast Tracks. And I always say that Malachar does a really good job at like, if we have ideas or anything we think that could be a net benefit for the organization or for the customers or whatever it is, he's always open to hear those things. And like I've always grabbed his ear here and there and kind of brought some things up. Is there anything, any like things that have went through your mind to be like, this would be kind of cool to like implement with Fast Tracks that could have an added benefit? Anything like that? Any thoughts or ideas that you've came up with, or just
Not at the moment. I do have the memory of a goldfish, so I don't I don't exactly remember off the top of my head. I can't really think of any. It was very well established by the time I came around. I don't have too many original thoughts with that. Um, yeah, he's done a great job with it, and everything is always. I always look at stuff in terms of safety. I definitely speak up quite a bit if something is unsafe, a customer, a situation, something like that. I'll usually be the first one to say something, and I've never found myself in that situation. And I figure everything else is kind of not really something that I need to be suggesting that we do things differently.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like the core stuff, like the way the organization is ran, as far as structure and things like that, not those, but like, I always try. I don't know. I gotta have a busy brain sometimes, and just like this thing, I'm like, man, it'd be great to have something that sets it a little bit of apart to like garner some more eyes, because I love the organization and how just family oriented, and how much we really just care about the customers and how about their time. And like, I want people to know that, you know what I mean? Like the biggest thing for me, like, I just want people to know, like, man, you gotta like, you won't know until you try it, but like doing things like this, like talking to the coaches to get like just a perspective and understand, like they're here for you. Like that's what they love to do. This, they love riding motorcycles, they love riding the track, and they love helping people out. And that's what this whole thing was about, was just try to get like some semblance of relatability and understanding, our backgrounds and just kind of like our passion for it, and how much we want to contribute to it and help, and just how much we're devoted to it. So I just things like that are things that I think about constantly for some reason. But
Yep. I think one thing that people are surprised by, at least people that don't, that haven't done a lot of track stuff, that don't, go to track days, that come out and either like observe or do their first track day, or their family that comes with them, is really like how well put together most people are, certainly the staff, how safe it is. Finding out that it's typically safer than the street, and just all that, it's not just everybody kind of going willy nilly and just, making it out by luck. It really is, very thoughtful, how everything is done, and why things are the way they are. On getting into, motorcycle riding, y- at least people that I was around, the thought is that the track is going to be 10 times more dangerous than the street because you're going faster. So why wouldn't it be more dangerous? When in reality, I think it's much safer, for all the reasons that we all know.
Yep.
All the things that normally get you typically aren't present at the track. And so, I think that surprises a lot of people, when they come out and see it for the first time, is what it's actually like versus what they thought it was going to be like.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I think that's all the questions that I have. Is there anything that like you wanted to touch on that we didn't cover? I mean, it could be any type of history stuff, or anything about the track or the organization or anything, man. Anything you wanna that we didn't cover that you think is really important that you'd like to speak on?
The only thing I'd like to say is that I just have nothing but great things to say about everybody at the track, the fast track staff, the Nelson Ledges staff, literally everybody that I've encountered, the corner workers, the medical staff, the pit stop grill, everybody there has just been super, super nice and welcoming. And I really appreciate the people that I've met at the track. And I don't know where else I would meet all these people.
Yeah, I agree. I think
Everybody there is just fantastic.
you're right. Like especially like the corner workers stuff. I think they're so underappreciated, man. It's like,
Mhm.
I mean, if we didn't have them, we wouldn't be running. I mean, and they
100%.
and they enjoy it, and they
Yep.
root everybody on. They're giving thumbs up to
Mhm.
everybody. It's just fantastic. Yeah, it's just such a great atmosphere, and I mean, I just love hanging out, and even after the day, like you said, it's about the people, and like it's just, man, the after the day, the hang, chilling,
Mhm.
eating, dinner, and BSing with everybody about the day. It's just such a great time. Hopefully, we'll get to
Yep.
see you out there a little bit more this year than we did last year. But yeah, dude. If there's nothing else, we can probably wrap up. And man, I appreciate you taking time out to do this. Like I tell everybody, this isn't some paid gig thing. It's just because we love to do this stuff, and
Mhm.
I'm glad that people are wanting to come on here and talk and let people know some stuff. And you had a lot of sweet information to pass on. And yeah, man, I just again just really really appreciate you being able to come out and or get on here and do this. So thanks
Mhm.
again.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, we'll wrap this one up. And that was Mr. Morrison Waud. So if you ever see him at the track, he'll usually. Do you still have your R1?
I do, but it is sitting in my office.
Oh, okay. So he'll
So
most
yeah,
likely
it's
be on
yeah,
his V4R Ducati if you
yep.
do see him. That R1 is so clean. Your R1, that thing
Thanks.
is mint, dude. But yeah, hit him up if you're ever out there. He's a great guy. Knows a shit ton about the track. He's been around it probably more times than any of us if you combine his car stuff. So, dude knows his stuff. Well, thank you again, sir, and we'll wrap up there. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll talk to you guys later.